Hello, hello. Welcome. You didn't like my activities? You can take them again. Why is it not sustainable?
Because it's paper.
And paper is not sustainable.
I mean, it's more sustainable than other things, but it's still.
No, you have to do an LTM paper and PDFs. How do you do an LTM paper and PDF? What is the functional unit?
Are you okay? Sorry.
So I hope you had a good dinner yesterday, and I hope you were not too tired after yesterday's sessions, because we have an exam. Oh, fish. What were the most important things that we learned yesterday?
Collaboration.
Collaboration,
Time.
time to be on time. That's very important. That's very important for Rodrigo, yes. Okay, so we talked about sustainability, 4 dimensions, interactions. We talked about that there's not one sustainability, but there are many different sustainabilities depending on where you are, the context you are, etc., etc. Then we also talked about life cycle assessment. Yeah, we talked that there are 2 main principles, well, main uses of life cycle assessment. One to compare products, and the other one is to find hotspots, right? And we also talked about eco-efficiency. Why did we talk about eco-efficiency? You divide something economic by something environmental, and that's it. And you need to find out your own indicators. So that's pretty much it, right? And then we talked with Peter and Kate about electronics watch, and most important, collaboration, right? And then we were opening up the road for today in the things. And so today we start with the sub-Indian continent. It was 6 men of the Hindustan, to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind. You might have seen this one before. The first approached the elephant, and happening to fall against his broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl, "God bless me, but the elephant is like a wall." The second, feeling the tusk, cried, "Ho! What have we here, so very round and smooth and sharp?" Maybe you want to read it for me. You don't mind reading it for me? No? Maybe yes? Do we have a microphone? Okay, to me, it is mighty clear. This wonder of an elephant is very like a spear. The third approached the animal, and happening to take the squirming trunk with his hand, thus boldly up and spoke. "I see," quoth he, "the elephant is very like a snake." The fourth reached out his eager hand, and felt about the knee. "What most this wondrous beast is like is mighty plain," quoth he. "'Tis clear enough the elephant is very like a tree." The fifth, who chanced to toast the ear, said, "Even the blindest man can tell what this resembles most. Deny the fact who can, this marvel of an elephant is very like a fan." The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope, than seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope, "I see," quoth he, "the elephant is very like a rope." And I told you yesterday, remember the elephant. Have you ever seen an elephant like this? So what happens when you just see parts of a system? You fail to see the entire system. What happens when you deal with sustainability only through environmental issues, only through human rights, only through sustainable public procurement? So in sustainability, as we talked about it yesterday, it's about connections. So we connect economic to the environmental side, environmental to the social side, human rights to the economic side, human rights to the environmental side. So everything is connected. And that's why it is very important that we have life cycle thinking, so that we can think throughout the stages, but also systems thinking. Yeah. And also all of these men of the Hindustan disputed long and loud and long, each in his opinion exceeding stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right, all were in the wrong. Okay, that's not so important. So the principles of systems thinking are, again, the natural laws, and we talked about them yesterday. Now, the law of conservation of mass. That means that mass is not produced, not destroyed. That was Lavoisier, for all of those who remember your chemistry history, long time ago. You cannot destroy mass. You transform it to something else. And we have the law of conservation of energy. The same thing goes to that. You cannot destroy energy. You cannot produce energy. You transform it. And most of the time you degrade it. Yeah? The same with mass. We have the laws of thermodynamics that we saw them yesterday, did we? Yes. So I'm going to go through them very quickly. So pretty much in the laws of thermodynamics, and they're laws, so you're lawyers, so you should know about the laws. One of them, it says heat is transferred from the hotter source to the cooler source. Yeah. And then the other one is that it degrades, becomes less of quality. We call them something else. I forgot how we call them. And as you approach the absolute zero, everything just stands still. The absolute zero is 273.1 negative Celsius. And if you really approach that, really cold, colder than Sweden in winter. So systems do not necessarily behave as the sum of their individual parts, nor do the parts' behavior necessarily follow the predicted behavior of the whole part. So if you think, for example, a river, or if you look behind you, you have a little pond, right? Which direction is the water going? If you think of a river, which direction is the water flowing? Does it always flow from one side to the other, upstream to downstream? No, the river as a whole moves upstream to downstream, but there are different movements within the river. So some parts of the river are not behaving in the same way that other parts. In social systems, so for example, organizations, and we talked about yesterday types of organizations, we have structures, norms, and interactions that mold our behavior, that make the system move in a different way, and what we call also mental models. Mental models, sorry, are the ways that we share. So all of us have now a pretty much similar mental model of sustainability. Not exactly the same, but pretty much similar. And we also have a mental model of sustainable public procurement, right? We base systems thinking on seeing wholes, not wholes, but with a W, so wholes, and their interrelations instead of cause effect. Cause effect is very good. Newton developed that one. So to every force that you apply, you have an opposite force of the same size, same strength. But in systems, you have more connections. So you might be pushing here, but then the system might be pushing you over here. Yeah? You have to understand patterns of change. So it's not just about taking a picture, but it's taking many pictures throughout time and seeing how those things are moving. There is no right answer. And that's a very important thing. And we've been discussing since yesterday, and it was Esme, I think, who asked about, oh, but what about going to the discussion on electronics? Should we take it to the lawyers or not? Well, there are many options, and no option is absolutely right. It's not like mathematics, 2 + 2 is 5. No, 2 + 2 is 4. And it's always 4. There's no other way around. But in law, in social sciences, in social systems, there are too many options. And all of them are right, partially, as with the elephant, and some of them are partially wrong. Some of them are really wrong. Okay, in particular for organizations, systems theory can help us to understand the interdependencies. And we're talking about interdependencies between the economic, environmental, social, and the time dimensions, between civil society, public sector organizations, corporations, hybrid things, but also between individuals. And that's when we're organizations, and we talked about it yesterday in chapter 3, I think. Chapter 3, not 4. We talked about an organization is composed of groups, and those groups are composed of individuals, and individuals interact with others, and the groups interact with others, and organizations interact with others. So why is it important to know about organizations for sustainable public procurement? Because you have buyers and you have suppliers and you have stakeholders. It's important to know the boundaries. As with LCA, we need to set up a context. We need to set up a scope. What are the boundaries of our system? Are we considering the entire system to be the Earth or just the University of Yevle? Okay. The roles of individuals within and across those boundaries. How are individuals changing that? So, for example, we have facilitators like Sigrid and Annette. We have also facilitators like Peter and Kate, who have a different role than the people who are working there. We have what we call leverage. You know, Archimedes, he was Greek, not Roman, sorry, but then he was killed by a Roman. Yes, by a Roman soldier. In Syracuse, was it? Can't remember. I know it was in Sicily, but I can't remember where. What do we mean by leverage? We have a big rock. How do we move the rock? We can push it, right? We can try to push it, or we can stick in a lever and then apply force, less force than will be required. And we also have something what is called the state of the system. State of the system. What do you mean by that? Okay, we have one, so something called equilibrium, and the other one is steady or stability, steady state. What's the difference? And one is when the forces acting within the system are in equilibrium, so you have two forces and they're both kind of happy in the same amount. And the other one is if you apply an external force, how likely is for the system to fall down? Okay, so this camera is pretty stable, right? How stable is my little clicker? Pretty unstable, right? Let's try with the other one. Pretty unstable. But if I put them like that, they're very stable. So I don't need to apply a force. There's a force already being applied called gravity, and that's trying to push it. So at the moment, the forces are stable, right? So it's in equilibrium. If I change that, it's not stable. So that's what we make the difference between equilibrium and stability or steady state. Just to give you an example, so for example, when you boil water in a closed pot, you come out 100 degrees and then some molecules are evaporating and some molecules are condensing, and then that's in equilibrium. And then stability is there. Okay. Is the little ball, red ball, stable or unstable? So this one is very stable, this one is neutral, and that's very unstable. So I showed you with my clicker. Yeah. Have I confused you already? No. Then I'm not doing a good job. We have, of course, different types of systems. We have what we call an open system, and that means that things move whatever they please. Yeah? All the material, all the energy can move in and out without any problems. And we talk also about labor, money, information, so things are pretty free in that sense. And then we have what we call closed systems. Closed systems is that nothing really enters, nothing really leaves, and everything is kind of in an hermetic thing. Is that all we have? Let me ask you, is the Earth an open or a closed system? Earth, planet Earth, calling planet Earth. Beam me up, Scotty. It's open. Okay, how many of you say it's open? How many of you say it's closed? How many of you are still sleepy? It's a hybrid, so it's electric. Why is it a hybrid?
Because we go to Mars.
Okay, let's go back to where we started. We started with the laws of mass and energy, right? Is it open when it comes to mass? No, it's pretty much closed. Most of the things that are on Earth are pulled by gravity, except some astronauts, cosmonauts, and some meteorites. But then they're very, very, very tiny when it comes to the massive thing. Even the satellites, when you consider your scope, they're still around here. So when it comes to mass, it's pretty much closed. What about energy? Open from the sun, open from both sides. It's open from all sides. When we're having the sun like today, we're receiving a lot of energy from the sun. But the other side of the world, that's releasing energy to the astros, to the space. So it's both open and closed. So we need to consider those things. We need to consider mass and we need to consider energy. Okay, is this room open or closed?
Open.
It's again both open and closed, depending on how we count it. At the moment, when it comes to mass, the bigger mass, it's pretty much closed, except for the air conditioning, because we're having air that I'm not so sure if it's going to be recycled or if it's being sent out, and then we have new air coming in. When it comes to energy, I would say it's somehow open, somehow, because we're getting sun over there and we're releasing also energy over here. I should have brought my little thermal camera. I have a thermal camera, very nice. You put it on and then you can see how things move. Very, very, very entertaining. So we have a lot of different system thinking tools as we have it for LCA. So what we have, the causal loop diagrams, and you might have seen them. And you have a little knot here, a little knot there, little arrows, and then positive and negative, and then it goes here and there. We also have systems dynamic modeling. That's pretty much like the Sims, the computer game, the Sims. Yes, pretty much like that, but in this way. So you try to model dynamically all the different systems. We have scenario planning. What would happen if I do this? What would happen if I do that? What would happen if I do that? And we have micro worlds. Again, that's pretty much virtual worlds. And that's what's in like, oh, I haven't played that games for a long time in that sense. So in causal loop diagrams, we have reinforcing feedback. That means that something is making the other thing bigger. Okay? So if I push this, is it going to be stopping or is it going to become bigger? If we're all thinking about sustainability, when you live here, I'm trying to reinforce it on you and you're going to reinforce it on somebody else. That's what we call a reinforcing feedback loop. And then we have the balancing feedback loop. Yeah? The balancing is the thing that is stopping things. Yeah? And then we have system delays. Yeah? You might know about system delays. You were a little bit delayed yesterday. Today, not that bad. But tomorrow, you cannot be late, okay? We have also relationships. We have the positive causal link. That means that one thing is to another one. And I was telling you about little arrows. And this is a little arrow there. That's positive. This one makes that one bigger. Yeah? And then we have the negative causal link. That one makes that one less. If you put money in the bank at the moment, any part in Europe, what happens to your money in a savings account? It disappears. So we have pretty much a negative feedback loop. But according to the EU commissioner, we should be changing the interest rates in order to make them positive. Okay, we should. But now we need to consider inflation. If we consider inflation, everything is negative. Okay. So, for example, we have the interest rate, we have the interest, we have the capital, and supposedly it should go bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah, I'm not an economist. Well, am I not? Maybe I am. I don't. I know I'm not a lawyer, but the rest of the things I probably are. And we have what we call exponential growth. So if you put money and then you capitalize that interest and you make it bigger than the capital and things like that, then you have your exponential growth. And then here we have an example of that. Yeah. You have a bank balance, you earn interest, and it becomes bigger and bigger. Yeah. Then we have a very important reinforcing loop. You know about Chernobyl? Yeah. Yes. Little small plant somewhere in Ukraine. What happens is that you have a core of uranium or plutonium, a radioactive material, and you have to cool it down in order to produce electricity. You produce steam. From the steam, you move some turbines, and from turbines, you produce electricity. What happens if you cannot cool down that core? Keeps on increasing and increasing and increasing, and the temperature becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until everything just poof, blows up. Same thing with Fukushima. Okay. So we have the reactor 4 in 1986 suffered a catastrophic thing. They say it was human error, human design. Well, they can be reinforcing one to the other. Then we have the radioactive fuel and core materials, and we start igniting the moderator, the balancing force. And then we have a positive feedback loop. And then we end up with, as my friends from Ireland and some parts of the Scotland would say, a wee hole, small hole there, and a big, massive problem of health issues, environmental issues that are still lasting until now. Fallout was all over Europe. Here in Sweden, we have major problems. So if you drill a hole in some of the old trees, you can still see the rings that are not straight, and they should be straight. 237 people suffer from acute radiation. Most of them died. 31 of them immediately, most of them afterwards. And 4 square kilometers of pine forest in the immediate vicinity of the reactor turned reddish brown. And we still have some wolves that are have 2 tails or glow at night. No, just kidding. But there are major problems. We have the other side of the coin. We have the balancing loops. So we have a thermostat somewhere over there, and you have a gap, you have a heater, and the thermostat, what it tells the heater is stop. Okay, stop heating or start heating. And then the thermostat interacts with the current temperature, producing a gap. The gap influences the furnace, which influences the current temperature. And then by increasing the thermostat, you increase the gap, and so on and so forth. Yeah, clear? So we have reinforcing feedback loops, positive feedback loops, and we have balancing and negative one. Very important. And then we go to systems and organizations. So somebody asked me yesterday, what is an organization? Yeah. They are integral part of modern societies. They were also part of ancient societies. You can call them integral part of societies. Okay. They are subsystems of a larger environment. So we have environment, and then we have organizations, and then they may be part of the economic system or not. And they have boundaries between the inside and the outside. So you have a boundary between this room and the library, physical boundary. But the university also has a boundary between the university and the city of Gävle. You saw it, right? It was not that clear, but there's a big sign saying there's a university. Okay, they are very complex systems. If you consider that each of us are extremely complex, each of us, and then we start just interacting with each other, and you say, oh, goodness sake, I thought mathematics and relativity theory was complicated. No, we are complicated. Forget about relativity theory. And we want to achieve a goal or objective. Every organization, every individual wants to achieve that. What is the objective of a church? Spread the word of God, or spiritual well-being, or both? Catching money. Okay, some do, some don't, but yes. What is the purpose of a corporation? Making profits. Okay, what is the purpose of a university? Making profit. If you are in the US or the UK, maybe, but what we want to do is, 1, educate people, and then maybe do some research depending on the type of university. Okay, but each organization has a particular objective, a particular goal, and the individuals in that organization should really be working towards that goal. And so that we can create value. And by value, I don't mean economic value. I mean value in a really broad sense. Well-being, so spiritual well-being, profit, learning, information, research, teaching. So that's what we call about value, not just economic value, all types of value. And an acceptable outcome for stakeholders. Probably a lawyer wrote that one, by acceptable outcome, right? Not just an outcome, just an acceptable outcome. Organizations have differentiating functions, and depending on the organization, they can be very hierarchical. So if you look, for example, at a company, you have the CEO, you have the CFO, you have the CSO, you have the CIA. Oh, no, sorry, the CIA is not really part of that. Okay, but you have very, very clear functions. If you look at a football club, you have the coach, you have the players, you have the people who bring water. We still have water boys in football club, maybe not, maybe you call the water persons, but they have differentiated functions. Sometimes they're very clear, sometimes they're not. And sometimes, even though you have differentiated functions, there are functions that are behind that happens. And they are affected by forces and conditions that operate beyond their boundaries. So if you think about the fish game yesterday, we had an operating market over there, and you could not control that market. So that was forcing you. But the same thing happens with any organization. You may have stakeholders that might be moving you, or you might have the government, or you might have your suppliers or your consumers, or you have for things that you cannot control within your boundaries. And that would affect how you create that value. They are semi-open or semi-closed, depending on how you look at it. So they are neither open or totally closed. If you think of Coca-Cola company, they sell a lot of products, right? But there's one thing that they keep in absolute secret, and that's the formula in absolute secret. So that is very, 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 very close. Many of the other things are open. So they get raw materials, they modify them, they transform them, and then they sell them somewhere else. Money comes in and disappears with its shareholders. Sorry. So we have some resources that exit, some resources that stay, and there are things that you cannot really move. In this university, we have the buildings that you cannot really move them, but you have the computers that you can move them. So there are some things that are there latent, and some things that enter, some things that leave. Hopefully, employees and people who work there come in and leave. Sadly, sometimes people come in and never leave. It has happened here. Okay, we have those differentiating functions between the hierarchy and labor division, and in very large organizations, we can divide them into top management, middle management, lower management, and what we call the rank and file positions that comes from ancient strategic management, and that comes from military history. Why? Because it something to do with the management. We talked about it yesterday. Yeah, we talked about economic, environmental, social, the time dimension, how they interact, but also these type of organizations. We have civil society, including education, NGOs, religious institutions, Looney Tunes institutions too. We have corporations, micro SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, large M&Ms, medium multinational enterprises, and TNCs, transnational enterprise, they're transnational corporations. There's a difference, but there's a slight difference. And then we have what we call the public sector or public sector organizations of government, or that includes local, regional, federal, national. But we also have what we call hybrid organizations. Those are organizations that are, for example, the port in Gävle. It's a corporation, but it's owned by the city of Gävle. So is it a corporation or is it public sector? So that's a kind of a really strange type of things. One of the typical, most traditional ones on the civil sector organization, that again depends on where you are. So in some countries, we consider higher education, so universities, university colleges, as part of the civil sector. In some parts, it's considered part of the public sector. In some parts, it's considered as part of the corporations. But we are going to be treating them as civil society here. Okay, so we have what we call a system. We have education, research, campus operations, community outreach, also called collaboration. Collaboration with other universities, assessment and reporting, institutional framework. That means all the goals and everything. On-campus life experience and educating the educators. So that's how we divide that system. And then we have a number of different stakeholders. So we have internal stakeholders, have students, faculty, staff, administrators, trustees. This is more of a US type of thing. We have community college stakeholders. So we have parents, colleges, accreditation board, business community, alumni, etc., etc., etc. Okay. We have corporations, and in corporations, we have these type of things. So we have operations and production. And yesterday we were talking about LCA, eco-efficiency, that affects pretty much that. We talked about management and strategy, and we talked about corporate sustainability, CSR, and those type of tools. We have the organizational system that includes leadership, human resources, those type of things, culture. We have governance, That is the rules of how the company operates, but also the board of directors, champions, etc. We have the supply chain, and then we have assessment and reporting. And we have primary and secondary stakeholders. I talked about these things in ATC3, but in case it was too long ago and you don't remember, we have primary stakeholders, owners, shareholders, and investors, employees and managers, customers, unions, suppliers, blah, blah, blah. And then we have the natural environment, and we have secondary stakeholders, such as the government, civic institutions, social pressure groups, trade bodies, competitors, general public, etc. And of course, we also have the same type in public sector organizations where we have, no, we don't have production. Usually we have what we call processes and services. We provide much more services and products. We have management and strategy, organizational systems, procurement and communication, collaboration, assessment, and institutional framework. And they also have different stakeholders, as you're all very aware. So you can see one way or the other. Here we have primary stakeholders, government, whereas for corporations, they were to be secondary ones. These ones are primary ones. Yeah, civic institutions, etc., etc. And Kate was talking yesterday about stakeholder and stakeholder awareness and recognition. So first, before addressing your stakeholders, you need to know who your stakeholders are. So don't go saying, oh, I have a plan about stakeholder management. Yeah, first draw up a map and plan of who are your stakeholders. So we can come out to an organization, any organization. Sorry about the waste, but any organization creates waste. Yeah. We have an internal and an external environment. We have things that come into the company, and we can divide them into material resources and energy, so the laws of conservation of mass, that have an economic value. They also have an environmental value, and we have human resources that come into the organization. Yeah, so far so good. We also have things that come out of that organization, products and services that have an economic value, that have an environmental value, hopefully higher than what came in. We have the human resources that I said, hopefully they leave at the end of the day. We have the infrastructure that stays. We have resources. We have the system that includes your operations and production, service provision, assessment and reporting, organizational systems, governance, management, and research and development. And those are always changing. Yeah. Which one is more important? Which one should be in the center? Well, it depends on the context of the organization. So in this case, if it's a company, a manufacturing company, most probably operations is in the center. But if you're talking about a hospital, maybe not. Maybe services should be there. Okay. We have we create waste. We also have what we call recovery, right? In Hasselt, you talked about circular economy. And we talk about reduce, recycle, remanufacture, the 3 hours, the 9 hours, the 2,500,000 hours. That is part of that. Okay, we can have internal recovery, we can have external recovery too. We have your supply chain, upstream and downstream. And we have all the different stakeholders. So we have internal stakeholders, employees, unions, management, and shareholders that are kind of in and out. We have suppliers, we have companies, we have other institutions. We also have the time dimension specified by the rate of change. So we talked about yesterday that a company can change very, very quickly. Some companies can change very quickly. Some companies take a bit longer. You think about an oil producing company, you know, how to you drill a hole inside the earth, how you get those things, how to do exploration takes a bit longer than if you used an IT company that just click, 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 click. Okay. And we have what we call the purpose fulfillment to add value, depending on what type of organization you have. And that is based on efficiency and effectiveness. And yesterday we talked about efficiency and effectiveness, right? And that is with the purpose of contributing to sustainability. So my question to you is, how does this help sustainable public procurement? And it's just a rhetorical question. Think about it, okay? We can also see it, as I said before, the organization as a set of individuals who belong to groups and groups that belong to the organization. We know that groups are a key element of the organization, and they consist of a limited number of individuals who interact, share values and norms to some degree, and perceive themselves as a group. Are we a group? Are we a group? Yes. we exist for a reason. So groups exist for a reason. Thank you. We exist for a reason of changing the world. Yeah. And not just arbitrary partitions of the system. So there is a purpose of us being here. Okay. We can accomplish complex interdependent tasks beyond the ability of just one of us. We can solve complex problems, can we? Hopefully. If not, we sue you. Okay. We provide a means of coordinating activities and collaboration activities, and we facilitate the implementation through generating participation and commitment. We can, or groups can, generate new ideas and creative solutions within the paradigm. So we can now start planting potatoes in the sea and provide opportunity for social interaction that improves morale and motivation. So we're hoping that your morale is very high, and your morale tomorrow has to be very, very high. Okay. And each of us as individuals, we are the basic block of organizations, of groups and organizations. And by joining a group of organizations, the individual surrenders consciously or unconsciously part of their individuality to fit in within the group's or organization's culture, especially when they feel part of a community within the group of that organization. So we have a paper at the moment on the review on sustainability in football clubs in Sweden. Sustainability in football clubs in Sweden. What the heck is that? Yes, for sure. No, that was the funder's choice. And the important thing of football clubs is that you have a fan base, and that fan base, although it may come from top levels of society, lower levels of society, I mean, the economic levels, not cultural levels, they're part of the fan base, and that fan base becomes a mass that cannot think. Okay, in some fan clubs, they just don't think. You leave your PhD degree outside, you come in and you especially some Italian clubs and some British clubs, yeah. So they really consciously or unconsciously leave out their individuality. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it's a bit more difficult. So each of us are unique, but not that unique, okay? We're not millennials. Are you millennials? I'm not, okay? And we are very difficult to manage. We develop new ideas, we have creative responses and push for change before opportunities disappear or minor problems become catastrophes. And that cumulative accomplishment can result in improved performance of the organization, of the group. So when do we use systems thinking? It's a question. Question mark.
All the time.
All the time. I think it's a very good answer. To be a bit more specific, when we have multiple perspectives on just what the situation is and how to deal with it. When things seem to oscillate endlessly. When a previously applied fix seems to overshoot the goal. When a previously applied fix has created problems somewhere else. There is more than one limit to growth. We have limited resources and are shared by others, so like in the fish game. Growth leads to decline elsewhere, and system changes have unintended consequences which are seldom connected to the cause. So when things are like, I don't really understand what is happening, you come back to systems thinking and you think about reinforcing feedback loops, balancing feedback loops. When today's problems come from yesterday's solutions, the harder you push, the harder the system pushes back. When the cause effect are not closely related in time and space. Small changes can produce big results, but the areas of highest leverage are often the least obvious. So you apply leverage, think here, thinking it's going to change here, but end up changing, and you're like, what the heck happened there? When dividing an elephant in half does not produce two small elephants. There are some things you can divide in half, and that's absolutely not a problem. You take a magnet, you cut a magnet in half, you have two magnets. You take an elephant, you cut an elephant in half, you don't have two elephants. And by the way, you are going to end up in jail probably. So, principles of systems thinking, look at the big picture. But that doesn't mean you have to forget the details. You have to be moving into the details, the bigger picture details. Okay? Pay attention to both the short and long-term consequences. Watch out for what short-term fixes. Yesterday, we're trying to have some short-term fixes for the fish game, right? We contribute to our own problems. Not only our actions, but our mental maps create our problems. So we have to change our mental maps. We have to help society do that. We have to realize that the cause and effect are often distant in time and space. So that's a new law for you to learn. The law of unintended consequences. That is very closely related to Murphy's law. You know Murphy? Okay, I hate him. We have to distinguish between the system and the symptom. So we need to understand the system that generates the problem and not just, as they love to do here in Sweden, have a paracetamol, have an ibuprofen, come back in 2 weeks. Yeah. If you go to any doctor here and probably many other parts of the world, just tell you have a paracetamol, have an ibuprofen, come back in 2 weeks. And if it's not fixed, have 2 more. Yeah? It doesn't really work because they're not looking at the system, they're looking at the symptom. Think and rather than or. And yesterday in assessment and reporting, we were thinking about GRI, and that was economic or environmental or social. But no, what we have to do in systems is economic and environmental and social and the time dimension. In complex systems, cause and effect are often distant in time and space. Yeah. Oh. We have an old thinking versus a new thinking. The old system, old thinking is Newtonian, Cartesian, which works pretty well for many things. So Newton and Descartes, they were really, really great scientists. They came out with really great laws, but they are not applied to, you cannot apply them to everything. No? We have reductionism. Everything you have to look it through a magnifying glass. Okay? If you look at it like that, can you see the entire slide? No. Now you need to look at that, but you also need to look at that. Okay? We have mechanistic approaches. Technology is going to solve all the problems of the world. Man, should I say person, dominates nature, but it's usually man. Okay? The old thinking is pretty much man conquering nature. We see the parts from the parts we put in the elephant. We have competition. Yeah? Yesterday in the fish game, you were kind of competing in the beginning. We have monodisciplinarism. That means you're a lawyer, I'm not a lawyer. You're a lawyer, I'm not a lawyer. But I'm a lawyer on international rights or whatever you call it. I'm a lawyer on this, I'm a lawyer on that. We have to think beyond our discipline. Our discipline just gives us some mental models, but we have to go beyond that and connect to other disciplines. The new system, new thinking, we have to use systems thinking. We need to use life cycle thinking. We have to think about holistic thinking, coexisting with nature, sustainability. Yeah? We have to see the elephant and the parts. We have to use collaboration. And we have to use transdisciplinarism. And Felipe is an expert now on transdisciplinarism, right? Yes. So we need to, yes, I'm a lawyer, but I'm a lawyer, I'm an engineer, I'm a manager, I have some sort of governance beyond disciplines. Why? Because I need to try to understand other people and try to understand other systems. The issues in each dimension of sustainability interact with the issues within the same dimension, but also with the issues in the other dimensions. So that means that if you're going to start creating value, monetary value, you're connecting with cost, right? But you're also connecting with how that is going to be affecting your workforce, how it's going to be affecting your volunteer, how it's going to be affecting the impacts that you have on the environment from your products. The interactions can be reinforcing or balancing and may have delayed effects. You remember this graph? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. You have the mics there. And if there's any questions on the Zoom, just let me know, please. You have a question? No. As I told you yesterday with the fish game, there were a lot of things that are going to become much clearer today. Okay. Questions, comments, complaints? I can see the hamster inside everybody's head just going.
It's probably stretching this.
Yes. Okay, if you don't have any questions, we can have a small, well, we can go and have fika. Okay,
Just one question from a bit of self-interest. How do you evaluate collaboration with Sapiens? And what changes, improvements you would suggest after, it's now more than 1 year for us in the program, it's close to 1 year for them.
let's turn the question inside out. How do you evaluate collaboration?
They already received the questionnaire and everything was.
Yeah, no, but that's you're talking about the ESRs. I'm talking about all of you, all of us who are here. How do we all see collaboration? And I only see 3 supervisors, 4, 5 supervisors here, 6. We're missing a lot of supervisors. So I cannot answer that question because I'm part inside the system, and that will require participatory action research as a research methodology. We're talking about research methodology in which, so pause that question and we'll answer it later. Yes. Microphone.
Our colleagues from an organization or even sympathizers.
Yeah, we have a microphone.
Would like to.
Mhm.
In sustainability, we often have some trade-offs, like between trade dimensions, so we can think about one measure that could affect positively in the environmental area, that's something, some trade-off in terms of economic efficiency and stuff like that. So with system thinking, we acknowledge better these interrelations that there are, but then in order not to get stuck and to solve these impasse, how can we?
Okay, first of all, trade-off is a concept that comes from economic theory. And taking it from economic theory is, if you do that, you're going to have a negative here. But why don't we call them synergies? So if we call them synergies, means that I can do something here and it's going to improve there. So we call it a reinforcing feedback loop rather than a balancing. Trade-off is a balancing feedback loop. So if I can do this or this. So it's not an and this. And correct me if I'm wrong on economics. She's an economist and a lawyer and something or something else. So it's an or, but we need to change that to an and. It doesn't mean that everything can be changed to and, because there are some things that you do that is going to have negative effects on the other one. So we need to start realizing which ones are positive and which ones are negative. And we need to try to address the positive. And if there's a negative one, we need to really come out in a collaborative way to say, can we avoid it? And if we simply cannot avoid it, well, which one do we choose as a society? But I would strongly use, strongly advise against the use of trade-off, because trade-off is or. Let's change to and. Can we do this and this? Yes, we can. Okay, but then why do we do this or this? No, let's try to change from an or to an and. Let's change from the left to the right. So.
Question on, stakeholder engagement, and this is a question that just like takes all of the presentations yesterday and today. What happens when you have like different stakeholders with obviously different agendas and different interests? How
You call Peter and he helps you with that.
how can you just deal with that, and with the question that Peter was also posing yesterday, when you have sometimes stakeholders with power imbalances? How can you overcome that?
That's when what we're going to be discussing just after lunch, right? We're going to be, not after lunch, after fika. collaboration theory. The simple answer to a very difficult question is difficult. It is. That's why we have collaboration, and Maria is going to be talking about collaboration, and in that way I'll say, look, how can we deal with all of these things? There are mathematical models, there are many different ways that they propose that. The most important is communication, transparency, collaboration. Okay? And it's going to become clearer later on. But it is difficult, very difficult. And Sigrid and Anel can tell you about that. Peter and Kate can tell you about that. I can tell you about that. Felipe can tell you about that because he's been working with the procurers in the. It's not easy. It's not 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 in systems thinking. Well, 1 + 1 in systems thinking can be 2, can be 0, can be 3. And you're looking at me like, what? Because in systems thinking, if you have 2 people or 2 groups or 2 organizations that work together, they can create much more than 2. They can create a lot. If you have 2 people who are fighting against each other, the system will not move, so a 0, or the system will go backwards, -1. So you have 3, 2, 1, 0,